With Dr. Mawowa. Doctor, do you think we will see any change in the new government or new administration, or will it just be the same old corruption with new faces and compromised senior military officers who were part of the regime who were doing corruption so more efficiently back then?
Well, I think there's been some speculation prior to this election that the government that emerged post-November has actually been caught between those who were pro-reforms and those who were resistant to reforms, the more military component of that government. And I think it has been then the speculation that President Emmerson Mnangagwa is seeking a fresh mandate which will allow him to push through certain reforms. We know that the military has been pervasive in its control of the economy. You just need to look at the parastatals. You need to look at the agricultural sector. There is a very brilliant book that was published last year by Dr. Showers Mawowa, which looks at the conflation of the military and the party state and the kind of economic interests that are vested in the military. And I think whether or not there will be reforms will be a dynamic or a dialogue between those with vested interests and those who want to see reforms. You know, are we going to see new heads in the parastatals? Of course, part of the reason why there has to be reforms, we know that some of the international players have made these as conditions for re-engagement, for assisting Zimbabwe with addressing its debt crisis. So if the international players would then insist on those economic benchmarks, I think there will be economic reforms. And I think it's clear that on the part of Mnangagwa, there is an interest to ensure that at least the economy works.
Doc, do you think Zimbabweans at this juncture will take advantage of what we know is a really historic opportunity now to change the trajectory or the direction of their country? Because most of the marchers and the protesters and the people we see coming out on the streets of Harare are young, and they have a strong and passionate yearning for change.
Yeah, that's important, because it goes on to the very nature of the social contract in Zimbabwe. I've said before that one of the exciting things for me as far as this election is concerned has been the participation of young people. Zimbabwe has a massive youth population, and these young people were quite excited about the election, and they were expecting a particular outcome. And I think a lot, there are a few indicators that we are going to see that will tell us how young people feel about the outcome of the election. One of which will be, are we going to see more Zimbabweans flocking into South Africa? That will tell us whether, you know, they have confidence in the outcome of the election. And I think the other worry could be that if young people are not happy with the outcome of the election, when they had invested so much confidence and expectation in the process, what other mechanisms are they going to resort to air their grievances? We need to face up to the fact that the urban electorate, who is affected by issues of unemployment, and this is where you find a lot of these young people, has not necessarily given ZANU-PF a mandate to lead. And that's why I think for me it will be very important for the government that emerges to speak to this constituency and deliver on some of the expectations.
Doc, we brought out those distressing images during our news coverage of the post-electoral violence yesterday, of the military turning its might on unarmed opposition supporters. From the images we saw army officers beating up an unarmed supporters. Now, I just want to touch on this kind of military intervention, because we saw it play out in the soft coup late last year in November, I think, and again yesterday. And one, of course, starts to worry if we're falling into a pattern here, or we're setting an unhealthy precedent even of military intervention or martial law being used increasingly in the political space?
Absolutely, and this is why for me we need not mince our words. We need to be unequivocal and make a statement that no matter the circumstances, there is no basis to justify a military response to people who are protesting. It's not the first time that we have seen violence, protest turn violence. It's a common occurrence even here in South Africa, but we have never seen the army being unleashed. It happens in many places in the world. So this resort to martial law is quite disturbing. But those who know the history of Zimbabwe would also tell you that it's not the first time that the military has been seen to be interfering. There's been reports in the past of the military being unleashed at night to maintain law and order. So this just goes to show that there is a lot of continuity as far as the military stranglehold on Zimbabwe's politics is concerned. But there's also something that I noticed from the videos about what happened yesterday. In one of the videos, you actually see the police trying to manage the situation, and it seems as if the interaction between the protesters and the police was actually amicable, to the extent that in some cases, the police are seen waving back at the protesters. And this almost brings you to remembrance what happened during the coup, where the police were on the wrong side of the coup. They were also on the wrong side of the protest. So the military forging an alliance with the protesters and allowing them to protest. But in this case, that video almost suggests that the police were not, necessarily vigorously clamping down on the protest. As much as we hear that the police are the ones who called in the army, but for me it raises questions given the context where we know that during the coup the police and the army were divided. And I think the statement by the war veterans earlier about the fear of a civil war may be informed by some kind of intelligence about the fracturing and the factions, the division that still exist in the security establishment. And I hope that this is not the case, because you can't talk of the possibility of a civil war which would pit opposition supporters versus the military. That's not a civil war. That would be state-sponsored violence on civilians. A civil war suggests division and antagonism that might actually result in open conflict between those who have weapons. And we know that opposition supporters do not necessarily have weapons of war.
Doc, before I let you go very quickly, and it's something I wanted to ask for a long time now, do you think Emmerson Mnangagwa has changed for the better following his role in the massacres? We know he played a big role there during the 1980s, when thousands of political opponents were killed and entire families, in fact, were killed when their homes were razed to the ground. Is he the right man for the job?
Yeah, well, I mean, he obviously says that he's a changed man. I think maybe just to start on whether he's the right man for the job, I think from those who have worked with him, they tend to commend his work ethic, that he is actually someone who is hardworking and who want to get things done, and he can get things done. So I think in terms of, the competence to get things done, we have already seen even this period that he has been in power, several deals being signed. He's someone who can talk business. He's someone who understands, I think, how an economy ought to run. So I think as far as that is concerned, it will be difficult to falter him. I think his past remains to be something that is a dark cloud that hangs over him. The Gukura Hundi issue in particular needs to be confronted. And there's been, calls for him to apologize because, at times it doesn't take much to reconcile with the people, to apologize if it's true that he is a changed man. He also purports to be very religious, and which is an interesting thing about both candidates, in this election. So he says he's very religious, he's a changed man, but I think the proof is in the pudding. What he actually does, is he going to apologize about Matebeleland? Is he going to own up to the accusations around subverting the election outcome in 2008? Because there's been some, accusation that Mugabe in 2008 had actually accepted defeat, and Mnangagwa, together with the military, then decided that no, we are not going to accept transfer of power to the opposition. So there is more that can be done, and that's why there is more confidence on whether he's going to deliver on the economy, and probably zero confidence on whether he's going to usher in political reforms and really democratize the state and protect human rights.
Dr. Showers Mawowa, thank you so much for sharing your time and invaluable insights so generously with Palesa and I on the SABC News Desk.
All right, of course, Keshan will continue to cover the developments coming out of Harare, Zimbabwe here on SABC News. So do stay tuned to SABC News channel as we take a short break.
SABC News celebrates Women's Month.
Clientele funeral plans.
It's your final gift of love.
I chose a clientele funeral plan because it's affordable and suits my budget.
I chose clientele because they are an original. They've been around for a long time, and I know within my family are in good hands.
I'm a farmer and I'm a businessman, and I know a good deal when I see one. Clientele is a good deal.
Clientele is the name I trust.
SMS plan to 31043 and we'll call you back.
Your weekly dose of art and entertainment news. Tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
We were saying similarly here, in a process which is intended to be impartial and independent, he should similarly recuse himself.
One can build conspiracies, and the fewer facts you have, the more easy it is to build conspiracies. And I suggest to you that when suggesting that there is some conspiracy about the witnesses were called, you might not have been aware of the facts that I've outlined to you.
Zimbabwe belongs to all Zimbabweans from all the four corners of Zimbabwe.
What a time! 1:54.26, another meeting record. She made it look effortless. Once again, Caster Semenya, no pacemaker required.
We've now passed the National Youth Policy, which guides all departments, because when you talk about youth development, you're not just talking about what the NYDA must do. It's what every other department must do. Sports and recreation, social development, the police and everybody else.
We need a solution. We need, if need be, let the president address us once a month and tell us what is he doing about youth unemployment.
Political consciousness that those young brave leaders had. You would remember very well that it was rife politically.
It's not actually operating in compliance with our rules and regulations. We really take stern action.
We all have a responsibility as South Africans to play our part in strengthening our democracy and building an ever better and prosperous South Africa.
Join your host, JJ Tabani, on Frankly Speaking every Sunday at 8:30.
The story of Guatu is a microcosm of the problems that continue to plague land reform, where the challenges of redistribution, restitution and security of tenure include not only addressing past injustices and making farms productive, but reclaiming identity.
I had, this belief that this is our government. Definitely, they will do whatever they can do for us to change our lives. But unfortunately, I think I was just naive.
It is the government of South Africa that is owning this land, and it is that government that is denying these people.
It is 4 o'clock Central African time. You're watching SA Today on SABC News Channel 404. We're striving for impartiality and, of course, independence. Warm welcome, and my name is Palesa Chumisa. Hi, Kesh.
Hello again, Palesa. Yes, the both of us will take you through the rest of the afternoon till about 6 p.m. Plenty to come, plenty to look forward to. So do stay locked on to the SABC News Channel. I'm Kirshni Govender. We'll bring you the headlines in a moment.
The MDC Alliance's Tendai Biti is no longer wanted by Zimbabwe's police.
And we're still in Zimbabwe, calm on the streets of Harare today following yesterday's post-electoral violence, with police making several arrests today.
And coming back home, Impala Platinum to cut its future production and slash the number of its mines to 6 from 11, worth 13,000 jobs to go within 2 years.
In our top story, the streets of Zimbabwe's capital Harare remain quiet today following yesterday's post-electoral violence, which left 3 people killed during protests over the country's election results.
Zimbabwean police have since arrested several people. Soldiers had opened fire with live ammunition while breaking up the demonstrations. All of the people killed were supporters of the opposition party Movement for Democratic Change, or the MDC. President Emmerson Mnangagwa said on Thursday that he is talking to the MDC's leader and candidate Nelson Chamisa to try to diffuse tension.
Well, Zimbabwe's ruling ZANU-PF calls for calm and restraint following yesterday's deadly violence.
We appeal to our colleagues in the opposition to ensure that their supporters maintain the calmness which existed when people went to vote. It is our hope as Zimbabweans that we accept that we belong to different political parties, but no life should be lost as a result of